Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Numi Talks. I am your host, Mark Long. Today I have with me Andrew Hawkins, CEO of Shieldpay. Andrew, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Mark.
Let's start with the most obvious thing as far as I'm concerned. Engineer to CTO to the controversial CTPO and now CEO. What's the reality of being a CEO?
I love it. I absolutely love it. I mean, the thread that runs through all of those roles throughout my career has been building things and solving problems. And part of being a CPTO, which was the role I had immediately prior to the one I have now, is solving problems for customers and manifesting that in technology, which is the building things bit. So that thread of building things and solving problems, CEO is just an extrapolation of that. You're just still solving problems every day for customers, internally, for shareholders, talking to the board, whomever it may be. But you're also building things. You're building a product for customers, you're building a business, you're building a place that people want to come and work every day. So there's a more obvious thread through that career than might be obvious. But being a CEO, I absolutely love it. I think if you're a CEO and you don't love it, there's trouble ahead.
I can imagine. I can well imagine. A lot of people aspire to get there though, and don't necessarily achieve that. I kind of think the 80s and the 90s in technology businesses, they were all led by marketeers, financiers, salespeople. And then since the millennium, we do have some engineers and technologists running businesses, but not very many. I don't know if you know the stats, like how many kind of engineering profile CEOs are there, like in comparison?
I don't know the stats off the top of my head, but if you think about the very large businesses out there, there are Tesla, Microsoft, Google, they're all led by ex-engineers. So there's certainly, it's arrogant and slightly misguided to compare Shieldpay to those businesses, but there's certainly plenty of precedence.
Yeah.
I think the key is, as a CEO, understanding your own strengths and weaknesses and making sure that you build a team around you that can compensate for the weaknesses.
Yeah.
So I'm not a natural marketeer. I've been in environments where marketing has been done well, where it hasn't been done well. I kind of, by experience, know what good looks like, but it's not my craft.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a very strong chief commercial officer who understands the breadth of things that go into selling, including filling the funnel, building brand.
Yeah.
So as a CEO, you just need to be very aware of what your strengths and weaknesses are and make sure that the team that you build around you will make up for those weaknesses.
Did you mindfully, intentionally work towards getting to that position? Did you set that yourself, as a goal like 5 years ago or something?
No, this is terrible advice for the audience. I've never really had a plan. I've just done what I enjoy doing and have built experience, acquired experience, have found myself in moments where there's an opportunity there that just seems obvious.
Yeah.
So I've kind of followed my nose, and I don't know if that's the right way of doing it, the wrong way of doing it. I joined Shieldpay in August of 22 as Chief Product and Technology Officer and had every intention of just doing that job for a long time.
Yeah.
And then the opportunity to move into this new role appeared, which I was just like, yeah, it was daunting and it scared me when the opportunity presented itself, but kind of rationalized it as an extrapolation of what I was already doing, which is context switching at relatively kind of extremes of the spectrum all day, every day, and never being the expert in the room.
Oh, right.
And at some point as a technologist, when you start to become post-technical, you're going to be in a room full of engineers where you're not the expert. You just need to be able to challenge effectively, get the best out of the team and make sure that they're heading in the right direction, but not be the expert in the room.
Yeah.
And I'm not a cyber expert. I don't have a testing pedigree. Internal enterprise systems were never my thing. But as a CTO, you're responsible for all those things. CEO is just an extrapolation of that. I'm in a room with people that I've never done their jobs,
Yeah.
but I need to be able to challenge them, direct them, get the best out of them. So I just followed my nose.
Okay. Well, I love that. Actually, I want to ask you a little bit more about the CPTO,
Sure.
because that's also a controversial subject in the world of product and the world of technology.
Yeah.
What are your opinions on that? Did you face some kind of criticism about that, or how did you navigate that?
No, I think in my experience, product and technology they're very close to one another in an organization. It's important that relationship is a positive one, and that technology are fed well by products, that they buy into what products are trying to do. There's a very tight relationship between those two disciplines. And like any relationship, there are times when tensions need to be negotiated, and somebody who is close enough to it and has the capacity to manage those tensions needs to be in place, which is what attracted me to the CPTO role. It was, I'm an individual who has a product background, has a technology background, can be a useful bind between these two halves of two pieces in the organization.
Yeah.
You shouldn't leave it up to the CEO to manage that tension or that opportunity, because they're busy doing other things. So I think it makes a lot of sense, and certainly appealed to what's important to me, and lent heavily on the skills and the experience that I had. So no, it was very natural.
Yeah. Okay. As you level up,
Yeah.
I can imagine there's less people that your direct peers that you can really open up to. Does it become lonely? Who do you talk to? You know, do you know what I mean?
It has the potential to be a lonely position, as I'm very aware and take very seriously the accountability that I have for 2 shareholders, 2 employees, for the health of the business. I know that that's on my shoulders, and I enjoy that. It's part of why I do it, and that could be lonely. I'm very lucky though, and I'm not sure everybody has this, but I'm very lucky that I've got 2 or 3 members of my team who I have an absolutely wonderful relationship, super trusting. There is nothing I can't say to these people that they won't take with, that they won't be responsible with and be able to handle and be able to coach me. And I've got coaches inside the business, and that is I wouldn't have been able to succeed over the last year if I didn't have that support. So I don't feel lonely, because I'm fortunate to have that support group around me.
That's really wonderful. Did those people, were they already in the business when you joined, or?
They were, and I won't be specific, although they know who they are. And actually, when the opportunity to become the CEO appeared, and I was sort of nervous and unsure, they enabled me to, you've got this, you're our CEO, go do it. And so they've been there since before I moved into the role. So I think without that support, I possibly wouldn't have moved into the role at all. But had I moved into the role, it would have been a very different year. And that loneliness you ask about, I think I could see where that would be a problem.
Well, credit and kudos to you, and fair play.
Well, to them.
For going for it and making it happen.
Yeah.
Let's talk about leadership traits, the qualities that one must have to achieve those goals that you've achieved, and in those leaders that you just referred to as well. What are those great leadership traits that you see?
I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all. I think there are great leaders with a certain set of traits and other great leaders with other traits, and in their environments that works for them. So that there isn't a magic, you need to be these things and the world will be good. I think what matters to me is building trust of the organisation in me, which the way I've interpreted that is to set out a very clear set of sort of values and principles that I hold dear. this is my operating manual, that this is important to me, this is important to me, this is important to me, which is a relatively easy thing to do, to stand up in front of the organisation and say, we're one team, we need to collaborate. That's a very easy thing to do. The hard part, which is where the trust is built and where you kind of earn the right to lead the organisation, is then to role model those values and to demonstrate that they are more than just words, that you actually mean them. And there will be times where what you have set out as being really important to you and to the business is being challenged internally, and you need to step in and delicately, not delicately, whatever the appropriate way of dealing with it is, deal with it. And I've had to do that many times over the last year. And the comforting thing is, after you've done that, which can be very difficult, the organisation, individuals in the organisation, they don't do it en masse. They don't turn up at your office and say, hey, Andrew, but individuals in the organisation whose opinion you really value will come to you and say, hey, that was tough, but you did the right thing there, thank you. And it builds engagement in that beating heart of the business that really matters. So it's that trust, setting out a clear set of principles and values and genuinely standing up to them and role modelling them. Once you've got that trust, the rest of it's relatively easy. Telling a big picture about where we're going, getting people excited, and then 1,000 nudges all day, every day. I can look back on a week and think, I didn't do anything big this week. There was no, wow, that thing defines this week. But you can look back on it, and in 100 different conversations, there were little nudges where you're, saying, actually, just giving somebody a pat on the back because they did a great job in a meeting that has been under pressure recently. And you're like, actually, do you know what? That was, you've got this, thank you. Yeah. It's those little nudges.
There was the boring, brilliant basics and the small, simple steps. They create that compound effect, don't they?
They really do.
And the consistency is really hard. We know that running businesses, being managers, being leaders, to live and breathe and stand up to those values that you've outlined when you're having a tough time too. Because life's not easy all the time. I mean, there can be outside of work things going on as well as inside of work things going on. Have you had scenarios where, it's been tough for you and you kind of have to open the door with your game face on, and inside you're kind of at odds?
And answer that slightly contentiously, perhaps. I don't have a game face. I don't think that's helpful. I think there's an authenticity that people expect in their leaders, that if you're having a bad day, something going on, something's, annoyed you, don't get emotional about it. I'm very aware that I'm being observed at all times. There's 100 people at the other end of that camera that are probably watching this that work for Shieldpay, and so I've got to be measured, but I also want to be authentic. If I'm having a bad, I'll say, look, guys, I'm struggling a bit. My wife's been unwell this week, and I've shared that with the business, so that if I'm in a group setting and I'm not on it, they're not thinking, oh, Andrew's a bit off. They think, oh yeah, well, good for him for turning up. He's doing the job. He's leading by example. So no, I think that authenticity not throwing things around and saying I'm really angry. That's silly, but there's no game. Game face is inauthentic.
Fair play, and vulnerability is good.
It is.
It is really good. Yeah.
Well, it helps to build
trust.
It
takes courage. It does take courage as well to be able to reveal that.
Yeah, my team don't always love it, but at least they know where I'm at.
Okay. All right. Okay. Cool. So let's talk about startup corporates. You and I met. Like we both agreed on a classification in terms of our diversity. We both achieved the over 50s bracket.
Yep.
Well done. We met like a decade ago, can you believe it? And I actually remember we went to somewhere near Paddington. I can't remember exactly where. It was a company called My Circle.
It was.
Do you remember?
I do.
So that was a tiny pokey startup.
It was.
No offense. And then we worked together through Pepper, really interesting company. Yeah. I actually found you a job at a big corporate, HSBC, who somebody told me a wonderful acronym, which is How Simple Became Complex.
It's absolutely right.
Yep.
Which is actually part of the answer to the question.
And now Shieldpay. So But what do you see as the difference between operating successfully in a corporate versus a startup?
It's an interesting one because superficially there are a lot of similarities. Structurally, a lot of the same roles, a lot of the same processes, a lot of the same acronyms. There's a lot that superficially is similar, and I don't think that's a bad thing because you don't always have to reinvent the wheel to succeed. So bringing the experience to Shieldpay, for example, from lots of big businesses can be helpful. I think where they fundamentally differ, though, is what success looks like. Because in a corporate like HSBC, for example, and this isn't always true, so it's not helpful to generalize sometimes, but in the most part, people were successful at HSBC who were able to operate the HSBC machine. It was about being an internal operator, knowing who to influence, how to play the game, what process needed to be invoked for their benefit. So it was about being successful inwardly facing. Mm-hmm. And I remember I spent the early years of my career, I spent 7 years at Microsoft. And I remember one of the motivations for leaving Microsoft was I was spending a lot of my time focused inwardly. I was operating the Microsoft machine. So how you succeed is based on your ability to operate internally. In a startup or a scale-up like Shieldpay, operating internally is actually frowned upon. It's politics. You're putting your energy into dealing with something that actually is probably not that consequential, rather than looking outwards to your competition, to the customers, to how you're going to get your next fundraising. So it's a very different mindset, being externally oriented and passionate about the customer and the competition, versus a corporate where you're internally oriented, working out how to operate the machine. Yeah. There's another key difference which I quite enjoy, but is not for the faint-hearted, which is in a corporate, even if you're at HSBC, I was responsible for 700 people, which sounds like a lot.
It does.
But in an organisation of 250,000 people, you're fitting into an existing culture and a way of working. Now, you can try and assert a microculture, but it will be against the grain. And you'll always have the infrastructure around you. If you veer a little bit off to the left, the machine will nudge you back onto the straight and narrow. So there are sort of guardrails and safety nets that are all around you. At a scale up like Shieldpay, there's nothing. There's just the edge, and you look over it, and it's great, but you get it wrong, and it's game over. And that's scary and exhilarating, but it's very different. The jeopardy is very different in a very large organisation versus a small organisation.
Yeah, you said that really well. And the impact of your decisions are closer.
Very close, yeah.
Wow.
It's fun, though.
Yeah. I spend a lot of time talking with founders and leaders in startups and scale-ups, way less time in corporates. Maybe that's part of my DNA, my profile, because I'm sort of fast.
Yeah.
Need to make things happen. Let me understand. What is that like then in these fast-paced businesses when you're operating at the board level, and also the exposure that you've had to either venture capital or private equity?
So I'm lucky that I've got a board that is currently relatively small, but packs a punch. Got some very capable people there that I find to be very supportive, which is a huge benefit as a new CEO. I'm a year into this. So that is part of that support framework I was talking about earlier that's been really helpful. I mean, the board as a construct, when you're also an exec, is, if it is able to challenge effectively, can be really helpful in making sure that actually the edge is a little bit further than you thought it was, because they can nudge you and keep you on the straight and narrow. But our chairman is a very impressive individual, was the CEO for City and EMEA for many years, So has operated at a level that I otherwise probably wouldn't have access to. So I've thoroughly enjoyed my time with Jim and the support that he's given. So the board is, I find, very helpful. I've had experiences with other boards that, in the most part, intend to be helpful. And if they have the experience and are close enough to the business to be able to be helpful, I find it very, it's an important part of the infrastructure of the company. In terms of investors and fundraising and VC, at the moment, things are tough. But having said that, if you are a business with a business model that you can demonstrate works, where you've got a team that have a track record of executing, and where you have a clear path to profitability, where there are no cells on a spreadsheet with insert magic here, some hockey stick, if we do this, amazing things will happen. But you've got a clear, based on these assumptions, based on this experience, if we do this, then this will happen and we'll be profitable. Then it can be done. Mm-hmm. But that bar is much higher. You need to be, than it was recently. Mm-hmm. You need to have a solid business model. You need to have a lot of success. Ideally be profitable. If you're not profitable, have a very clear path to profitability that's defensible, that will stand up to scrutiny. But then it is possible.
What do you think's changed if you're in the market for fundraising in 23 versus 21? What's changed?
It's being able to stand up to that scrutiny. The speculative good team with a half decent idea but no plan that may have, if you're in whichever particular area is popular at the time, having that, it was relatively easy. Now the bar is much higher. You need to be a very credible business with a track record, a plan that works, a team that can execute, and it needs to stand up to scrutiny. And the numbers will be smaller, and the valuation will be smaller. So it's a slog. Yeah. I'm very lucky that Pete, the founder of Shieldpay, I'm not the founder. Pete Janes is extremely competent at fundraising and kind of leads the charge on that and does a very good job of it for us.
Okay. Valuable insight. Thank you, Andrew. Let's talk about Shieldpay.
Okay.
What is Shieldpay? One sentence. What is Shieldpay?
High value complex payments. So that's the one sentence.
Yeah.
Let me bring that to life a little bit. So one of the areas that we are kind of the dominant fintech is moving monies around when there's a very large M&A transaction, for example. So let's say one company is buying another company for £400 million, and you've got to get all that money from the pockets of one entity into individuals, investors, companies that are all shareholders in the target business. We make all of that magic happen. So we verify that all of the parties in the transaction are trustworthy, which can be quite exciting, unwinding the ultimate beneficial owner of a trust that owns a thing, and you see some interesting things. Mm-hmm. So that's a very important part of what we do. We then receive and hold the funds for days, weeks, years, doesn't matter, and then make sure that those funds safely get into the hands of the shareholders in the business. When I told you that before we started recording, you weren't that excited. The bit that gets...
I was like, can you say that again, please?
It's big numbers moving between lots of people. I guess the exciting bit is we believe, the only business like us operating in that space. We compete with the likes of JP Morgan. And if you want to get 100 people excited, tell them that there's a project we're working on and you're going up against JP Morgan, that gets the blood flowing. And they beat us sometimes, we beat them, I'll say most of the time. But it's fun.
Is it a David and Goliath?
Very much so, yeah. But we have the advantage. It's kind of, if you take the challenger bank movement over the last 10, 15 years, taking on the high street, that's kind of been, it's still playing out, but it's basically been done. It hasn't happened in corporate banking.
Yeah.
There isn't a Monzo of corporate banking biting at JP Morgan's heels. Well, there wasn't. There is now.
Yeah.
And that's what gets us going.
Yeah, that's great. That's great to hear that you're actually doing that. I think some of the other incumbents against the institution are also starting to be challenged as well. So I guess it's the next evolution of technology. When we think back to the .com, it was, what was it, gambling and porn, and then it was retail, and then it was travel, and then it starts to layer into the infrastructure, doesn't it? So
yeah, but I mean, whilst it sounds fun to be, taking on the big guys, that's not why we're doing it. We're doing it because we can see that there is a very ineffective way of that problem being solved today. I mean, it would scare you to see how some of these transactions get carried out today. Law firms do it themselves. Moving money around is not the core expertise of a law firm.
Yeah.
So that's fraught with risk, and their regulator, the SRA, is getting a lot more interested in how law firms manage money, and it's becoming too expensive and too risky for them. So we're solving a real problem for a real customer. We just happen to be having fun competing with the big boys at the same time.
I bet your people love it. Do they all sign up to the mission, to the North Star? Is that part of the attraction?
To become the payment rails for the legal services industry is, you need to break that down into what that means for the individual. Mm-hmm. So in our fin crime team, for example, it means you'll be dealing with some really interesting projects where people do try and launder money, they do try and finance terrorism. There are all sorts of bad things that do happen in the world, and it's part of our responsibility to make sure that we're not contributing to that. Mm-hmm. And if you're from that domain, there aren't many places where you can cut your craft in an environment like ours, which has all of the bells and whistles that you would expect of a scale up and a fintech. It's exciting. We really value our people. There's career development. You get exposed to things that you otherwise, when you're in a very big machine, you will stay in your narrow lane. Mm-hmm. At Shieldpay, you're only 1 degree of separation from somebody with a very different job to you. Mm-hmm. So you get exposed to a lot more than you might at a big company. So it's about breaking it down into what it means for that individual coming into that role.
Yeah.
But we do a good job of attracting and retaining people. So it seems to work.
What do you think about artificial intelligence, and how does that impact your business?
It's such a broad topic that it's quite hard to sort of encapsulate as one thing. When you're talking about spotting and avoiding financial crime being perpetrated, then clearly machine learning models that can interrogate large sets of data and perhaps provide answers that you might not have seen yourself is of huge benefit. We're still developing that capability. We don't fully have it online, but it's a direction we intend to go in. There are some projects we get involved in where we have tens of thousands of consumers on the other end of we get involved in the disbursement of class action lawsuits, for example, where 10,000 consumers might take a big company to court, and we need to get the money into the hands of those individuals. We can't staff a contact centre to handle that level of inbound traffic 365 days a year, because we may only do 3, 4, 5 of those projects a year for 1 week each. So having a chat agent that uses generative AI techniques to cut that down to a much smaller, more normal level of traffic for us is useful. Mm-hmm. But I think for the most part, at the moment, I think this is true, having talked around and listened, I think this is true generally. Generative AI is a power-up for the jobs we already do. It might be a temporary window, but I use it for creating content. I know others in the company use it for creating content. We use Copilot, GitHub Copilot, so a lot of our engineers will use it for writing code that perhaps isn't complex. It's utility code to do a thing that's been done before. Mm-hmm. So it's a power-up for just doing the jobs that we already do.
I love that phrase. It's a power-up. That's really cool. When you're talking about your team as well, and you're talking about their their want to join your company. You talked about your retention being high too.
Yeah.
Can we talk about interviewing?
Yeah.
Close to my heart, but close to most of our audience's heart as well, because businesses are made with great people, great leaders, great managers. I think we know that people leave bad bosses more than companies.
Yeah.
In the interview and selection process, what does great look like to you? What's an A player, firstly? And then we can dig into how you get to that.
So I think table stakes is being able to demonstrate that you have the skills to do the job. Skills can be acquired, right? So it's, have you done this before? Have you done it in an environment that's as challenging as ours? But that's a relatively easy thing to find, people with the experience. The next level is what's your attitude towards work? Why do you do it? What's your motivation? Because if your motivation is, I want to do a 9 to 5 because I've got this lifestyle I need to fund, great. That works for you. That might not be the environment that we are. I mean, we actually have very good flexible working policies. I don't think we do work extreme hours, but you need to buy in to be comfortable with that raw environment that a startup and a scale-up is. So understanding somebody's, what is your attitude to work? What's your motivation? Why do you want to get up and go to work in the morning? Will qualify quite early whether somebody's going to be successful or not. Mm-hmm. And also what their attitude towards being a part of a team is. So I'm fortunate that I lead a relatively small organisation, 100 people. So I say that we're one team, and I believe it to be true, because I think you can have 100 people all pull in the same direction and feel like they have each other's back. So testing what somebody's attitude towards being in a team is. Are they in it for themselves? Are they talking about what am I going to get out of this? Or are they talking about the experience where they were in a team and it was great because an outcome happened that couldn't have been achieved if a collection of individuals came together? Mm-hmm. So those are the things that I look for.
Yeah. I heard last year a survey was done in Amazon about the 4 main reasons that a person would choose to join a company. And they ranked it as number 1 was culture, so the team. Number 2 was impact. Number 3 was computational or intellectual stimulation. And the 4th one was compensation. And it flipped because originally, years before that study, it was about the money.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, it's good. What is your favorite or your killer interview question?
So I've got a box of great questions. And I'm in a little bit of danger here of like a magician showing his tricks. But I think if you're a candidate that I'm about to interview and you've made the effort to get this far through this conversation, then you deserve the
fair play.
Yeah, fair play. I'll give it to you. So I ask the candidate, what are the 3 skills the 3 strengths that you believe are necessary to be successful in this role? I ignore the first 2. Well, the third one is where they're slightly like, and then ask them to give an example of where that strength has been necessary to succeed in their role, and they'll tell me a story, and then I'll zoom into a detail in the story, so that the objective is to get them way off script.
Yeah,
they're not, and there's no amount of prep can get you ready for another thing and another thing and another thing. Now I know you're off script. Now let's have a conversation, because then you get the real them. They'll probably not be talking about the thing that was most successful that they can riff on all day and impress you with. They'll be in some uncomfortable place. And then you just have a conversation about it and just pick on it. But you've got them off script, and that's the key.
Good. I'm glad that you've picked one particular question out of your toolbox of questions. In your interview and selection process and the way that you bring people into your organization, you must be doing something incredible, because you told me you have 82% diversity in your organization.
Yes.
Can you just share with our audience how you've achieved that? Because that's incredible.
There are some very practical things you can do that you can go and Google or ask ChatGPT and it will give you the answer. That's not the difference between having a diverse organisation and not. I think what really makes the difference is genuinely believing that having a diverse set of teammates is a good thing. It's really valuing it, not thinking it's the right thing to do because, of course, it's the right thing to do. It's genuinely believing that having people in the room that bring different experiences, that have different backgrounds, that don't think the same way that you do is a good thing, and that the challenge that brings is worthwhile and for the benefit of the business. So you can make sure that job posts don't have biased language towards one group of the population to another. Yes, you can have flexible working policies so that people that have responsibilities outside of the home can continue to stand up to. Those are all relatively easy things to do because you can just choose to do them. It's that genuine visceral belief that it is helpful to have a diverse population. If you do, then it just naturally happens. It on the back of those other initiatives, it just naturally happens.
And that comes through in the tone and the voice,
the behaviours,
the population, the behaviours.
100%.
And people can
100%.
feel it in an interview, I guess, because they'll be meeting various people during the selection process that will be diverse in nature. Like 4 out of 5 of your team are.
You don't get a choice, it just happens.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. Well, thank you for doing that in your company. That's amazing.
Well,
hopefully we can have other
I'm not going to
companies
take
like this.
any of the credit. I do lead by example, but I didn't set the standard. It's been like that since before I joined, so it's a good thing.
It's truly wonderful. I'm going to finish up with one last question.
Sure.
We've had a turbulent time. 2020 through till now has been very up and down, boom and bust. How do you see the rest of this year playing out? What's your forecast? If you had a magic wand or a glass?
For Shieldpay, we've got a fantastic year ahead of us. We're just over 2/3 of the way through our 5th record quarter in a row. Wow. So we're on a trajectory, which I don't see any reason why that would slow down. So I think for Shieldpay, it's a good year. More generally, it's tough to call it. I mean, we know that interest rates have maxed out. There's debate about when they start to come down, which will have its own effect on the economy. We know that there's lots of. It's an election year, so it's all over the world. Something like, I'm making this up, but orders of magnitude, 3/4 of the world live in countries that are having elections this year.
I didn't know that.
It's a very large. Ignore the 3/4, don't start. But it's that order of magnitude. It's a very large number of people live in countries that have elections this year. So it's a difficult one to. Having said that, we in our business are starting to see things reverse. The M&A activity, which is one of our core propositions, is picking back up. We are seeing the fundraising conversations are getting ever so slightly easier than they were. Not a lot easier, but slightly easier than they were. So it feels as though, from standing inside Shieldpay looking out, because that's the only perspective I have, things are starting to improve. But who knows?
Who knows? Well, I'm so glad to hear that you've had 5 quarters in a row record breaking, which is good. And you're a success story. You've shared so many insights, so many valuable insights for our audience. So thank you so much for your time today, Andrew.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me,
This has
Mark.
gone so quickly as well. Thank you so much. We didn't get to talk about your footballer salary for a day. Maybe the next time.
Well, there's a reason to have me back.
Yes, there's a reason to have you back. And thank you all for staying with us today. This has been another episode of Numi Talks. Please stay tuned, subscribe, because we have plenty more episodes on the way. Thank you.